The glass fell and shattered on the white tiled floor, its sound slicing through the air of the wedding anniversary party for Lucille Grant's son and making everyone freeze amid the music. Under the gaze of dozens of guests, her daughter-in-law, Elena, smiled, her voice sweet yet chilling. "It's time for you to rest, Mother. Aaron and I will take care of the house. You don't have to worry anymore." Lucille went still. Her hands clenched the napkin, feeling every joint tremble with anger and humiliation. The guests laughed politely, thinking it was a kind gesture, but only Lucille understood Elena had just declared war. When the party ended, the lake house sank into silence. The scent of Elena's expensive perfume lingered in the air. Lucille quietly gathered the glasses and dishes, the clinking porcelain echoing like her own heartbeat. The kitchen door opened, and Elena walked in graceful as ever, her smile perfectly intact. "I only want to make you more comfortable. Older people shouldn't burden themselves with everything. This house is mine," Elena Lucille replied, softly, her tone even, but her eyes hard. "I'm still perfectly capable of taking care of it." Elena shrugged. "Of course, but you're not young anymore. Aaron worries about you so much. I just want to help ease his mind." Lucille said nothing. In her daughter-in-law's eyes, she saw a coldness she had never seen before. That night, when Aaron and Elena went upstairs, Lucille sat alone under the dim yellow light. Rose petals fell from the glass vase onto the wooden table, looking like the full stop to an era of peace. The next morning, Elena began redecorating the living room. The embroidered curtains Lucille had sewn by hand were taken down and replaced with sheer white fabric that felt cold and impersonal. The armchair where her husband used to read was dragged to the backyard. "I think I'm doing the right thing," Elena said when she saw Lucille watching. "The house needs a change." Lucille pressed her lips together. "Old things aren't always bad. They just need to be cared for properly." Elena simply smiled. "You'll understand eventually." Aaron came home late. When his mother told him what had happened, he merely patted her shoulder. "She just wants to make things fresh." "Don't worry, Mom." Lucille nodded, though her heart sank. Her son's eyes avoided hers like someone trying to convince himself. That night in the small attic, Lucille opened her late husband's old drawer. Inside, she found a yellowed stack of papers. In the middle was the property deed of the house with only one name written: Lucille Grant. She sat still, her fingers trembling as they traced the letters, a mixture of pain and strength spreading through her chest. When the clock struck 11, Elena's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Don't worry, just a few more weeks. I already spoke to Dr. Lewis. If she forgets a few more times, we'll have the mental incompetence certificate." Lucille froze. They were planning to get rid of her legally, neatly, quietly. She moved slowly toward the old box in the corner of the room, an electronic relic Elena had told her to throw away the baby monitor from when Aaron was little. She wiped off the dust, plugged it in, and adjusted the frequency. Static crackled. Then Elena's voice came through clearly. "Once she's declared incompetent, the house will be ours." Lucille stood motionless, her breathing heavy. In the darkness, her face was carved with deep lines like traces of an old storm. But in her gray eyes, something flared alive again, sharp and clear as steel reforged after years of silence. They thought she was a frail old mother, ready to give up. They didn't know that in this house, every brick and every frame bore her name. She had once lived with a husband who was a judge, had learned how to read the law, and had long known how to keep secrets. Lucille sat at the table and opened an old notebook, writing the first line in slow, deliberate handwriting: "Begin collecting evidence." Below it, she noted the date, time, and every word she had heard. She would not argue. She would wait and watch. When the moment came, the truth would speak for her. outside wind from the lake whipped hard against the windows. Lucille looked out at the misty water and heard the rustling leaves whispering from the past. "Don't be afraid, don't yield." She spoke to herself in a low, steady voice. "I let them think I was weak. Now it's my turn to show them what real strength looks like." She turned off the light and the room sank into darkness. Only the pale moonlight reflected on the glass window, illuminating the calm face of a woman everyone in the house had mistaken for defeated. Inside her, a plan was taking shape, slow, precise, and dangerous, like a wild cat preparing to strike. The next morning, Elena woke to see her mother-in-law making tea, calm and composed, as if she knew nothing. She didn't notice that in the teacup, Lucille was stirring the wind outside had just begun to rise over the lake, signaling that a storm was coming. Morning at Grant Lake House was so still that the sound of oars gliding across the water could be heard clearly. Lucille sat by the window with a steaming cup of tea in her hand, her eyes gazing out at the garden. Outside, Elena stood with two workers gesturing toward the rose trellis. "Tear it all down. We're going to build a summer living room there. My mother-in-law doesn't use it anyway." Her voice was clear and sharp as a blade. Lucille quietly set her teacup down. Every word Elena spoke felt like a hammer striking her heart. That garden had once been where her husband planted roses for her every spring, and now it was about to be leveled in the name of modern aesthetics. Aaron came home at noon, his face tired after a long hospital shift. Lucille brought out freshly baked pastries, but Elena quickly took the tray, her voice gentle in front of him. "Let me handle it. Mother needs to rest." As soon as Aaron went upstairs, she turned and lowered her voice. "Don't make him more stressed, Mother. He can't handle it anymore. Stressed because of who Elena Lucille asked." Elena gave a thin smile. "Because of you, of course. He worries about you. But old people sometimes don't realize when they need help." The words cut deep. Lucille looked at her young daughter-in-law's shining brown hair, a flawless smile, eyes cold as ice. She saw it clearly now. Elena saw her as an obstacle. "Help or replace?" Lucille asked quietly. Elena shrugged. "Is there really a difference?" When Elena left the kitchen, Lucille stood motionless, her breath catching. The house that had once been peaceful was slowly becoming someone else's domain, but she had no intention of being pushed out. As the afternoon faded, she walked next door to visit Mrs. Bloom, an elderly woman with silver hair, who had once been an investigative journalist. After hearing Lucille's story, Bloom sighed. "You're living with a viper. If she plans to make up lies, you need light to expose her proof." Lucille frowned. "I don't want a scandal." "Not a scandal," Bloom replied. "The truth. Install cameras, not just recorders. When she shows her true self, you'll have evidence." That night, Lucille couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of Bloom's words and of her husband's eyes in their old wedding photo. He had once told her justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs proof. That line echoed in her mind as she opened the wooden drawer and took out the old baby monitor. She wiped off the dust and turned it on. Static buzzed for a moment, then went silent. She smiled. That little device would be the beginning. The next morning, while Elena went shopping, Lucille began her plan. She took several small cameras Mrs. Bloom had lent her and carefully hid them inside the hallway clock, behind the painting in the living room, and near the kitchen shelves. Every movement was slow and deliberate. Each twist of a screw, each wire plugged in, felt like the heartbeat returning to a woman once thought to be weak. When everything was done, Lucille sat down, a thin layer of sweat on her forehead. She no longer felt afraid. A strange calm spread through her, the calm of someone who had just reclaimed control. That afternoon, Elena returned home, smiling brightly at her husband. They said the property transfer can be done in a few weeks. Dr. Lewis is ready to help. Lucille heard every word through the crack of the door. She didn't step out, just quietly opened her notebook and wrote, Day 2. She's involved Dr. Lewis in her plan. That night, Aaron sat with his mother. Don't mind Elena. She's only worried about you. Lucille looked at her son, her voice soft but steady. Sometimes people worry about you only so you'll get out of their way. He fell silent, startled, then quickly stood when Elena called him. When their door closed, Lucille turned on the small monitor hidden in her desk drawer. Elena's image appeared on the screen. She was in the kitchen on the phone. Yes, I've recorded everything. Every time she forgets something, I make a note. Dr. Lewis said just a few more weeks. Lucille stared at the screen, unblinking. Every word Elena spoke was like a stone dropping into the lake, rippling outward. She saw her path clearly now: silence, observation, patience. Let them reveal their own guilt. The night wind drifted through the window, carrying the cold scent of the lake. Lucille quietly closed her notebook and turned off the screen. In the moonlight reflected on the wooden desk, her face was illuminated no longer the fragile mother they thought she was, but a woman quietly taking power into her own hands. She whispered to herself like a vow, I'll let them destroy themselves with their own game. The next afternoon, the lake house was bathed in sunlight, but inside Lucille felt nothing but cold. The smell of fresh paint filled the living room. Elena had called the workers early, not even bothering to ask for permission. You'll love it, Mother, she said when she noticed Lucille's frown. White makes the house brighter, cleaner. Lucille looked at the wall that once held her husband's handprints, the place where he had hung their wedding photo taken by the lake. Now it stood bare, covered in a thick, lifeless coat of paint. Brighter, yes, but it's lost all warmth, she murmured. Elena pretended not to hear, instructing the workers to remove the old frames. When they left that afternoon, Lucille sat alone in the empty room. On the table still sat the half-eaten pastry Aaron had left behind. The steady ticking of the grandfather clock filled the silence, and inside it a small hidden camera captured every move. She looked up, knowing that everything Elena had done that day was being recorded. That evening, Elena hosted another small gathering. A few friends from the city arrived, elegant people who loved to talk about homes, investments, and wealth. Lucille helped set the table without saying a word. Elena poured the wine and smiled brightly. This house has so much potential, she told a woman in a velvet blue dress. Once we replace a few outdated things, we could turn it into a luxury vacation estate. The guests looked around, impressed. It's wonderful. Who owns the property now? Elena smiled, her voice smooth and sharp as a knife. For now, my mother-in-law. But she's getting older, so she'll transfer it soon. Lucille stood in the corner, every word piercing her heart. She still smiled calmly, pouring more wine, her eyes drifting toward the grandfather clock, where every sentence Elena spoke was being recorded. After the guests left, Elena saw them out while Aaron stayed behind to clean. Lucille overheard her whispering on the phone near the back door. He'll sign, don't worry. A few more incidents, and Dr. Lewis will have enough to file the papers. An old, forgetful woman shouldn't be holding on to such a valuable property. When Elena closed the door, Lucille went to her study and retrieved the recording. She listened again, every word echoing coldly in her headphones. Those words were evidence now, but she knew that to defeat someone like Elena, sound alone wouldn't be enough. The next morning, Lucille went to the village market. The old fish seller looked surprised. Haven't seen you down here in a while. She smiled faintly. I've been busy fixing up the house. On her way back, she stopped by a small electronics shop and bought a set of miniature microphones and a backup recorder. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow when she paid in cash, the bills carefully wrapped in a cloth pouch. Planning an investigation, ma'am. "Something like that," Lucille replied, her eyes steady and determined. When she returned home, Elena was standing by the doorway talking to a man in a gray suit. "This is Stuart, a real estate agent," Elena said sweetly. "He's just here to look at the lakeside property." Lucille looked up. "Why is there an agent here?" Elena smiled. "I just wanted to know the value of the house in case we need to restructure." Restructure or sell, Lucille's voice was low, slow, and cutting. Elena's smile stayed, but a flicker of irritation crossed her eyes. "You're imagining things, Mother." After Stuart left, Lucille sat down on the sofa. Aaron came in, trying to ease the tension. "Mom, don't misunderstand. Elena's just checking." "I won't let anyone do anything without your permission." Lucille nodded slightly, but inside, she felt a wave of sadness mixed with anger. She realized her son still loved her, but he was blind. He no longer saw what was happening right in front of him. That night, when the couple had gone to bed, Lucille stepped quietly into the hallway. The lake waves lapped gently against the shore, the moon's reflection rippling faintly across the glass window. She opened her notebook and wrote in firm, deliberate handwriting, "Day 3. She brought an agent today. Increased camera coverage in the kitchen and back porch. She took another microphone and hid it behind the vase near the dining table, then sat back down and listened to the sounds of the house. The wind slipping through the cracks, the ticking of the clock, and amid those faint sounds, Lucille could feel her own heartbeat steady and strong, no longer trembling. This house was no longer just a home. It was a battlefield, and from this night on, she was no longer the one being hunted. She was the one waiting quietly for the arrogant serpent to coil itself into her trap. On Wednesday morning, sunlight streamed through the glass window, casting its glow over the table where Lucille was arranging the property ownership documents. The red seal was still clear, and the words "Lucille Grant" stood out like a reminder this house belonged to her and no one else. She placed the papers back into the metal safe, locked it carefully, and looked out at the garden. Elena was walking along the fence, speaking sweetly on the phone. "He just needs to sign. I'll handle the rest," she said, her tone smooth as silk. Lucille's chest tightened. Aaron wasn't a bad man, just too soft-hearted, and Elena knew exactly how to use that love like a rope to bind him. At lunch, Elena served Aaron's favorite cream soup. "Eat up, I made it just for you," she said, glancing at her mother-in-law as if she were unnecessary. When Aaron finished eating, Elena's voice turned casual. "This morning, Mother forgot her car keys again. I saw her searching for them everywhere." Aaron looked at his mother with concern. "Is that true?" Mom Lucille smiled calmly. "The keys were right where they always are. Someone must be mistaken." Elena tilted her head. "Everyone gets forgetful sometimes, don't we?" Mother Lucille swallowed her anger. Elena was building her narrative, turning her into the senile old woman of her story. When Aaron left the room, Lucille noticed a small notebook on the kitchen table. The first page was filled with scribbles. Day 20. Forgot the car keys. Day 22. Forgot to turn off the stove. She closed it slowly, her eyes turning cold. That afternoon, Lucille visited her neighbor Bloom, the retired investigative journalist. She's keeping records of everything Lucille said quietly. Bloom nodded. "If she's setting you up, you need light to expose the dark. Cameras, not just recordings." Lucille hesitated. "I don't want a scene." Bloom smiled knowingly. "It's not a scandal. It's proof." That night, Lucille climbed onto a chair and attached a small microphone behind the dining room lamp. When she tested it, Elena's voice came through clearly. "If she loses capacity, the assets go to the legal guardian. It'll make everything easier." Lucille froze, her heart pounding. Legal guardian. Elena was talking about herself. The next morning, Lucille pretended to be forgetful, dropping a spoon and muttering, "Old age, I suppose." Elena looked at her satisfaction flickering in her eyes. Every move Lucille made was now another evidence entry in Elena's fabricated journal. At noon, Elena announced she was going to meet Dr. Lewis. When her car pulled away, Lucille opened the cabinet and retrieved the tape recorder. Elena's voice came through cold and deliberate. "I've got the journal. Just a few more weeks." Lucille sealed the tape carefully and wrote on the label, Day 4. That night, Aaron came home late. "Mom, you shouldn't stay up so late. You've looked tired lately," he said softly. Lucille smiled. "I'm fine. I just need to protect what your father left behind." He fell silent, avoiding her gaze. As he went upstairs, Lucille called out quietly, "Sometimes people only see what they want to believe, but the truth doesn't disappear. It only waits to be revealed." The house fell into stillness. On the table, the recorder blinked with a small red light, patiently capturing every sound. Outside, the wind from the lake grew stronger, carrying the gentle chime of wind bells. Lucille closed her eyes and smiled a thin, sharp smile like the edge of a blade. The game had begun, and she knew with absolute certainty the final victory would be hers. The next morning, fog covered the lake, and the dim light looked like a curtain hiding secrets. Lucille woke early, sitting by the window with her notebook in hand. On the new page, she wrote in her neat handwriting, Day 5. Elena accelerates. From the yard below came the sound of a car engine. Elena stepped out in a white dress, her golden hair neatly tied back, holding a stack of papers. Through the crack in the curtain, Lucille saw her speaking to the same man as before, Stuart, the real estate agent. "I want to sell quickly but discreetly." Elena said, her voice low but clear. "The paperwork will be ready within the month." Lucille drew in a slow breath, a cold anger rising in her chest. The house wasn't lost yet, but in Elena's mind, it already belonged to her. By noon, Elena returned home, her face glowing as she spoke nonstop. "Good news," she said brightly. "Dr. Lewis will be joining us for dinner. He wants to do a quick checkup on you just to make sure everything's fine. Don't worry, Mother, it's just a formality." Lucille looked at her and nodded. "Good. I'd like to see just how senile I've become." The remark made Elena pause for a second before she regained her smile. "You have such a sense of humor, Mother," she said lightly. But in her eyes, there was a flicker, the kind of flicker only liars are afraid of. That afternoon, Lucille and Mrs. Bloom sat by the fence holding cups of hot coffee. "They're bringing the doctor tonight," Lucille said quietly. "I need to be ready." Bloom smiled faintly and handed her a small hard drive. "All camera data will automatically back up here. If anything happens, I'll deliver it to the police." Lucille gripped her friend's hand, gratitude mixed with tension. "Thank you. I won't let them destroy my name." That evening, the dining table was neatly set. Lucille wore a pale blue dress, her face lightly powdered, looking calm yet alert. Elena led Dr. Lewis inside a man with salt and pepper hair, polite smile, and cold eyes. "Just a standard memory test, Mrs. Grant," he said smoothly. Lucille nodded. "I'm ready." The examination took place in front of Aaron and Elena. The doctor read a list of words, asking her to repeat them. Lucille answered 4 out of 5, correctly, deliberately forgetting one. When he asked her to draw a clock, she drew the shape perfectly, but placed the hands incorrectly. Elena stood beside him, her eyes gleaming as though she had just won a game of chess. When it was over, the doctor made quick notes and smiled politely. Nothing serious, just mild loss of focus. Quite normal for your age. Elena's smile faltered briefly before she recovered. "Thank you, doctor. Mother will be glad to hear that." Lucille replied warmly. "Thank you, and thank you to my daughter-in-law for caring so much about her mother-in-law's health. Elena smiled again, but her lips were stiff. After the doctor left, Lucille walked slowly to her study. She opened the cabinet, retrieved a new memory card, and copied the entire recording of the evening from Elena's phone call discussing the plan, to the moment the doctor stepped out and accepted the envelope. On screen, everything was clear. Elena's hand placing the thick envelope on top of the file, her soft but sharp voice saying, "I trust you'll write exactly what's needed," and his response. Of course. Lucille closed the laptop. The fear that had once lived in her heart was gone, replaced by resolve. From that moment, she was no longer defending herself. Night fell and the wind rose from the lake, carrying the sound of waves against the shore. Lucille stood by the window listening as the moonlight glowed across her face, calm, cold, and resolute. She whispered softly, her voice steady as steel. "They want to write my story, but I'll be the one directing it." Beyond the wall, Elena and Aaron's voices could be heard arguing. Lucille caught fragments. "You're always defending her, and I'm only trying to help." She closed her eyes and smiled. The house stood still, silent as a witness. And now it was returning to its true owner, the woman ready to begin the final act of this quiet war. The next morning, gray clouds blanketed the lake, a warning that the storm was coming. Lucille sat in her study, replaying last night's recording. Every word from Elena cut through the air like a blade. "He'll sign soon. She's weak now. No one believes a forgetful old woman." Lucille paused. The playback took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. The more she listened, the colder she felt. Elena wasn't just manipulative. She was confident she would win, but that very confidence would be her downfall. By noon, Elena came in carrying a tray of freshly baked pastries. "Try one, Mother. I made them just for you." She said, her voice soft as silk. Lucille looked at the tray and smiled. "Thank you, they look delicious." She broke off a piece, tasted it lightly, then set it down. "Too sweet," she said. "I still prefer the flavor I make myself." Elena pressed her lips together. "You should let others take care of you. At your age, there's no need to work so hard." Lucille replied gently. "People only rest when they have nothing left to do. I still have work to do." That afternoon, Aaron came home early. As he changed his shirt, he said Dr. Lewis sent the results. "He thinks you're showing mild signs of memory decline." Lucille looked up. "Is that so? Don't worry, it's just a preliminary assessment. Elena thinks you should take more tests." Lucille smiled faintly. "And you believe that Aaron hesitated, his eyes uncertain. She could see he was torn between love and loyalty." That night, the house felt unusually still. Lucille sat in the kitchen pretending to read a magazine, the small recorder in her pocket quietly running. When Elena entered, Lucille didn't look up. The younger woman opened the fridge, poured herself a glass of wine, and muttered softly to herself, "Just a few more days, and it'll all be mine." Her voice blended with the ticking clock, forming a melody of blind confidence. Lucille lowered her eyes, hiding a smile. Elena didn't know every word was being captured. The wind picked up that night, rattling the windows. Lucille sat before the small screen, watching the video of Elena slipping an envelope to Dr. Lewis. She transferred the footage to an external drive and labeled it Day 6, Bribery Confirmed. When it was done, she closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. Relief and unease mixed in her chest. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall she was building around herself. The next morning, Elena returned with a stack of brochures. "The seaside nursing home is wonderful," she said brightly. "The air is fresh, the staff attentive. I think you'd love it." Lucille glanced at the glossy photos and smiled. "You plan to send me that far away?" Elena gave a light laugh. "I just want you to have the best care. You won't have to worry about a thing there." Lucille folded the brochure slowly, her eyes never leaving the younger woman's face. You know, Elena, sometimes people take care of someone not out of kindness, but to keep them exactly where they can be controlled. Elena smiled again, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. What are you implying? Mother Lucille simply shrugged. Nothing at all. I'm just talking about human nature. When Elena left the room, Lucille opened her drawer and took out the envelope holding the evidence. She brushed her fingers along the edge of the paper, feeling an unexpected calm. She had once been weak, once afraid of losing everything, but now that fear had turned into fire. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, and the waves beat against the shore like a pounding heart. Lucille stood and looked around the familiar house. Every corner now had eyes and ears hers. Her daughter-in-law believed she was losing her mind, but in truth, Lucille was remembering everything, every word, every move. And when the picture was complete, she would make sure the whole world saw who the truly sane one was. The next morning, the sky was heavy and gray. The lake lay perfectly still, like a mirror waiting for the first gust of wind to stir its surface. Lucille sat by the window, a teacup in hand, watching Elena pacing in the garden, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low but clear in the quiet air. "Don't worry," she said. "I've already spoken with Dr. Lewis. Once the guardianship papers are done, the house will be in our name. She'll be nothing but a shadow." Lucille set her cup down, her hands trembling slightly, though her eyes were steady and cold. The pretense was over. Elena wasn't hiding anything anymore. To her, it was already finished, just waiting for an official seal. What she didn't know was that this house had ears, and every word she spoke was being recorded. By noon, Elena was telling her husband that Dr. Lewis would stop by one last time to finalize the paperwork. Aaron, exhausted after a hospital shift, only nodded, too tired to ask questions. Lucille heard it all from the kitchen. She stirred her tea slowly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Inside, she was calm, ready for the final act. Every camera was running, every microphone perfectly placed, and all data backed up to the hard drive at Mrs. Bloom's house. When Dr. Lewis arrived, light rain had begun to fall. He entered smelling of disinfectant and false courtesy. Elena followed him, perfectly dressed face, glowing with calculated charm. "Hello, Mother," she said sweetly. "The doctor just wants to ask you a few simple questions so you'll feel at ease." Lucille nodded. "Good. I've always admired people who care so much about justice." Elena froze for a second, then quickly recovered her smile. The doctor opened his notebook and began with memory questions, dates, names, the day of the week. Lucille answered slowly, deliberately, making one small mistake, then looked him straight in the eye. "I suppose I didn't do very well." He smiled politely. "It's fine, just procedure for your age." When he asked her to draw a clock, she placed the hands wrong on purpose. Behind him, Elena's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. When the test ended, he closed his folder and said evenly, "I'll finish my report tonight. Based on what I've observed, I can confirm moderate cognitive decline." Elena nodded, her lips curling. "Thank you, doctor. Mother will get the best care." Lucille smiled faintly, her gaze sharp. "Thank you, dear. It's comforting to know how attentive you are." As they walked to the door, the microphone hidden in the lamp caught every sound. Elena's voice dropped low. "Thank you, doctor. I knew I could count on you." Then came the soft rustle of an envelope. The doctor murmured, "I'll send the official report tonight." Lucille sat motionless, lips pressed tight. She didn't need to hear more. She had everything. That evening, after they left, Lucille turned on her computer. The screen glowed to life, showing the recording. Elena sliding the envelope across the file, her confident smile, her lips moving to say, "This is a small thank you." Beside her, Dr. Lewis accepted it without hesitation, face expressionless, as though he'd done it many times before. Lucille saved the file into a new folder titled Day 7, Bribery and False Certification. When it was done, she leaned back, closed her eyes, and listened to the rain tapping against the porch roof. Later that night, Aaron came home. The only light came from the fireplace. Lucille sat quietly stitching a shirt, her focus steady as though she hadn't heard him enter. "You're still awake, Mom?" he asked wearily. "I have a lot to think about," she replied. "Son, when people try too hard to prove they're right, it's usually because they're afraid to face the truth." Aaron rubbed his temples. "Dr. Lewis thinks you should have a temporary guardian just for safety. Please don't be upset with Elena." Lucille looked up, her eyes meeting his. Safety for whom, Aaron? For me, or for the one trying to control me? He said nothing, avoiding her gaze. From the stairs came Elena's soft voice, her hair down her tone sugary. "Honey, come to bed. Mother needs her rest." Aaron sighed and stood. "Try to sleep, Mom. Don't think too much." He went upstairs. Elena smiled at Lucille, a perfect mask, but even the firelight reflected its falseness. When their door closed, Lucille turned off the lights. In the darkness, the tiny red light of the recorder blinked steadily. She opened her laptop, replaying the scene, the whisper, the envelope, the greed in Elena's eyes. Every second was flawless evidence. She sent a copy to Bloom with a short note. "I have enough." Outside, wind howled over the lake, rain pounding hard against the windows. Lucille stood at the window as lightning flashed, illuminating her calm, determined face. "They think I've lost my mind," she murmured, "but their arrogance will destroy them." She closed her laptop, poured another cup of tea, and sat by the fire. The house was silent except for the rain and the steady tick of the old clock. Lucille leaned back, a faint smile touching her lips. The smile of a woman who knows she's about to win a game everyone else thought was already over. The next morning, the sky was covered in a dull sheet of gray. The lake was still the wind, almost motionless. Lucille stood in the kitchen watching the steam rise from her coffee cup as she listened to Elena speaking on the phone in the living room. Her voice was low, but every word was clear in the quiet house. "Everything's almost done. Once the guardianship papers are signed, I'll move her to the care center. Don't worry, this house will sell for a good price." Lucille froze. She thought she had already heard the worst from Elena, but no. There was always another blade hidden behind that sweet voice. Her chest tightened as she turned her gaze to the grandfather clock, the symbol of the house, now its silent witness. The hidden camera inside was still running, the tiny red light, blinking steadily like a loyal eye. By noon, Aaron came home. He tried to act normal, but his face looked weary, his eyes avoiding hers. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he began hesitantly. "Elena thinks it might be better if you rested somewhere with professional care. I don't want you to feel lonely, but I worry about you." Lucille looked at her son, the same boy who once promised to protect her, for life now being led like a child. "You worry about me, or you're afraid I'll disturb your happiness." Aaron lowered his head. "Please don't say that, Mom. Elena just wants what's best." Lucille smiled, gentle but chilling. Sometimes what people call the best is just a polite way to push someone out of their lives. He didn't answer, only murmured, "Dr. Lewis will send the certification today. Please don't stress too much." Then he left for the stairs, unable to meet her eyes. Lucille stood still for a long time. The house was so quiet she could hear the flap of a bird's wings outside the porch. A slow sadness spread through her, but underneath it burned a sharp, terrifying clarity. She knew that to save herself, she had to let them expose themselves. That afternoon, she went to Bloom's house. Her old friend opened the door, and upon seeing Lucille holding a small metal box, immediately understood. "It's time, isn't it?" Bloom asked. Lucille nodded. "I have everything photos, recordings, proof, but I need an outside witness." Bloom picked up the phone. "I have a friend in the Elder Protection Agency. We'll meet him tomorrow morning. He knows how to handle things quietly." Lucille squeezed her friend's hand, eyes glistening. "Thank you. I don't just want to escape. I want them to learn to fear the truth." That evening, Elena organized a family dinner. She claimed it was to reconcile. The table was set with candles, red wine, and roast beef, the very dish Lucille once taught her to make. But tonight the smell made her sick. Elena spoke softly, her voice like honey. Mother Dr. Lewis sent his summary. He thinks having a guardian would make things easier. Lucille smiled faintly. Easier for whom Elena set her glass down, still smiling politely. "For all of us. I know you're tired. You deserve peace of mind." Lucille placed her fork down, her expression calm. "Peace of mind. You're right. I also want peace, especially when I know exactly who's been scheming inside my own home." The air froze. Aaron looked from his mother to his wife. Elena gave a small laugh, trying to ease the tension. "Mother, why would you say that? I just..." Lucille cut her off, her voice low and steady. "Stop pretending. Everything you've said, everything you've done, I've heard it all, and I've seen it." Elena's body stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "Think carefully." Lucille said each word slow and deliberate, like drops of water falling on fire. "Every conversation you've had with Dr. Lewis, with the realtor, with the man named Julian has been recorded." Aaron shot up from his chair. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Lucille met his gaze, her eyes blazing. "The truth, my son. And tomorrow morning the Elder Protection Agency will receive every single one of those recordings." Elena's face turned pale. "You can't do that. You're making this up, making it up." Lucille let out a soft laugh. "Then why are you afraid?" The air shattered like a cracked mirror. Aaron looked at his wife, and in her eyes he saw something he had never seen before. Panic. She stammered. "Honey, can't you see she's losing control?" Lucille rose from her seat, her voice calm but cutting like steel. "I have never been more in control than I am now, and tomorrow everyone will know it." Elena stepped back, terror flickering across her face. The house fell into a heavy silence. Only the wind from the lake and the trembling candlelight moved, casting the shadows of 3 people, a liar, a blind man, and a mother, ready to end the game. Later that night, Lucille gathered her documents and placed them carefully into a leather bag. She opened the window, took a deep breath, and listened as rain began to fall. In the flash of lightning, her reflection appeared in the glass. Calm, cold, and proud. Tomorrow, she whispered, they'll learn that a mother's trust is not something you can betray without paying the price. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the lake covered in a thin veil of mist like a mourning shroud. Lucille woke early, put on a thick gray coat, and picked up the leather bag holding her tapes and documents. As she stepped toward the door, Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, her face still drowsy, but her eyes instantly alert. "Where are you going so early?" Mother Lucille smiled, her tone unusually gentle. "I have an important appointment, just something small." Elena tried to sound casual. "You should rest. The air's still damp. You might catch a cold." Lucille looked at her calm and steady. "Don't worry, dear. I know exactly what I'm doing." Mrs. Bloom's car stopped at the gate, the silhouette of her old friend visible behind the wheel. Lucille turned once more to the house. Every window, every wall, every memory seemed to be watching her in silence. Then she got into the car, the door closed, and a light breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine from the porch. The drive into town was quiet. Only when they turned onto the cobblestone road did Bloom finally speak. "The man we're meeting is Mr. Davies, a supervisor from the Elder Protective Services. He's handled many cases like yours. Very discreet." Lucille nodded. "I don't want a scandal. I just want justice." The building they arrived at was modest with red brick walls and an old sign that read, "Elder Protective Services." Inside, the air smelled of paper and coffee. Mr. Davies, a middle-aged man with understanding eyes, stood to greet her and shook her hand. "Mrs. Grant, I've been briefed. Please tell me everything without hesitation." Lucille opened her bag and placed the hard drive, a stack of papers, and her notebook on the table. Her voice was steady and deliberate. "These are records of voice images and notes from the past 10 days. They're trying to declare me mentally unfit to seize my home and assets. Dr. Lewis Finch accepted money to write a false report." Davies plugged in the hard drive, opened his laptop, and played the footage. In the quiet room, only the soft patter of rain could be heard against the window. Then came Elena's voice, sharp and clear. "Once the guardianship papers are done, the house will be ours. She'll just be a ghost." Then the rustle of an envelope followed by Dr. Lewis's voice, "I'll send the report tonight." Davies looked up, his expression hardening. "That's enough. This is clear evidence of coercion and legal abuse. We'll open an emergency investigation." Lucille nodded calmly. "All I want is to protect my son from being used. He's not a bad man, just blind." Davies nodded in return. "Understood. You'll be protected by law, and the house cannot be transferred until the court's review is complete." When she finished signing the statement, Davies handed her a copy. "Be careful, Mrs. Grant. When someone manipulative feels their control slipping, they tend to act recklessly." Lucille smiled faintly. "I know, but I'm not afraid anymore." That afternoon, she returned home. Elena was waiting at the door, her fake smile wavering. "You were out long today." "I was just about to make your favorite soup." Lucille's voice was gentle. "I only visited an old friend. She asked about you." Elena's smile tightened. "Really? That's nice." Dinner was quiet. Aaron sat between the two women he loved in such different ways, weariness flickering in his eyes. Lucille remained composed, every movement precise and graceful. Elena tried to make small talk about nursing homes, the weather, but every time their eyes met, she felt something different in Lucille's gaze. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was silent power. When night fell and the house was asleep, Lucille opened her window and looked out at the lake. The dark water shimmered under the moonlight. She knew that by tomorrow everything would change. The investigation would begin, the law would intervene, and that sweet mask would start to crack. She returned to her desk, opened her notebook, and wrote the final line for the Day 9. "They think I've been silent because I'm weak. But in truth, I've been silent so I could listen as they tied their own noose." She closed the notebook and blew out the candle. In the darkness, only the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore remained steady and calm, like the heartbeat of a woman who had just conquered her fear and was ready to reclaim her life. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the gray clouds, reflecting off the still surface of the lake. The air inside the house was cold and silent, as if everything within its walls was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. Lucille woke early, brewed her tea, and sat at her desk. In her hands was the certified report signed by Mr. Davies. The paper was thin, the signature in blue ink delicate, yet it felt heavy like the weight of justice itself. She folded it carefully, slipped it into a separate envelope, and looked around the familiar room. This house was no longer just a home. It was a battlefield. Every wall, every corner carried a part of the story, and every hidden camera was ready to record its final chapter. Elena appeared in the doorway wearing her usual polite smile. "You're up early, Mother. Did you sleep well?" Lucille replied softly. Well enough. One always sleeps soundly when there's nothing left to hide. Elena hesitated. What do you mean? Just an old woman's thought, Lucille said calmly, taking a sip of tea. When Elena left, Lucille opened the drawer and took out her old phone. The live recording mode was already set, transmitting everything straight to Bloom's computer. Everything was in place. By noon, Aaron received a call from the local law office. He frowned as he listened, then turned to Elena. Someone anonymously sent a report to my firm about medical fraud. They said it involves Mom and Dr. Lewis. Elena's face drained of color, though she forced a laugh. That must be some mistake. Don't worry about it. But they have recordings. Lucille, sitting nearby, cutting slices of cake, said evenly, If it's true, you have nothing to fear. If it's false, justice will take care of itself. Elena didn't answer. Her hand trembled as she poured water beads of sweat forming on her forehead. She quickly regained her composure, her voice sweet again. Let's just have lunch, shall we? No need to talk about things that upset Mother. When Aaron left, Elena turned to Lucille, suspicion flashing in her eyes. What did you do? Lucille only shrugged. Me nothing. I just spoke to people who actually listen. That afternoon, Elena tore through Lucille's study. She yanked open drawers and rummaged through every folder, but all the documents were gone. Only an empty metal box remained and a single handwritten note. You can tidy the house, but you can't tidy away the truth. She threw the note down, breathing heavily. A vague, creeping fear began to take root. From the corner of the room, the small camera hidden inside the lamp quietly recorded her every move. Near sunset, Bloom called. Davies has transferred the case to the court. They'll issue a freeze on the property until the matter is fully reviewed. Lucille simply replied, Thank you. Now we wait. As the sun went down, the house grew quiet again. Elena tried to act normal, but her voice no longer carried its usual confidence. Aaron noticed and asked gently, Are you all right? Of course, she said, though her eyes avoided his. That night, when everyone went upstairs, Lucille opened her laptop and checked her email. A new message from Davies awaited her. Mrs. Grant, we've verified the evidence's authenticity. Please be prepared. The police will arrive tomorrow to take your statement. She read it, nodded slowly, and closed the screen. Outside, the wind was rising, making the curtains tremble. Lucille stood by the window, looking out at the dark water. The lake shimmered faintly like a mirror reflecting her face, a woman who had endured enough loss to fear nothing anymore. That night, she sat by the fireplace, quietly mending her late husband's old handkerchief. Her heart was calm. Upstairs, Elena's hurried footsteps echoed across the floor, followed by the muffled sound of a phone call. Her voice trembled faintly in the hallway. No one knows yet. I'll take care of it. Lucille closed her eyes and smiled. The tremor in Elena's voice was the sound she had been waiting for. For the first time, fear had changed sides. She opened her notebook and wrote the final entry of the day 10. The truth has begun to speak. And when the wind changes direction, liars will have nowhere left to hide. Outside, the steady rhythm of waves against the shore blended with the ticking of the old clock, the sound marking that the silent war within the house was finally approaching its end. The next morning, the sky brightened slowly after the night's rain. Faint sunlight filtered through the windows, filling the kitchen with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Lucille stood by the sink, a towel in her hand, calmly drying a teacup. She knew this would be an important day, the day when everything hidden beneath layers of pretense would finally be revealed. Elena walked in, dressed more neatly than usual, forcing a bright smile. Mother, I have to step out this morning to meet the lawyer about the guardianship papers. It's all just a formality. Please don't stress about it. Lucille set the cup down, her tone gentle but firm. You don't need to worry about me, dear. Just worry about yourself." Elena frowned slightly, about to respond when the doorbell rang. Aaron opened the door to find 2 policemen and a court officer standing outside. The man in front was Mr. Davies, Mrs. "Grant," he said, his tone respectful yet firm. "We're here to enforce an emergency protection order and collect your statement." Elena went pale, stepping back in alarm. "Excuse me, there must be some mistake. I'm the legal guardian here." Davies looked at her calmly. "No, you are not. By temporary court order, all transactions and actions related to this property are suspended until the investigation into financial abuse is complete." Aaron turned to his wife, stunned. "Financial abuse? Elena, what are they talking about?" She forced a nervous laugh. "Someone must be spreading lies. Don't listen to them." Davies set a laptop on the table and pressed play. The room fell silent as a familiar voice echoed through the speakers. "Don't worry, I already spoke to Dr. Lewis. Once the guardianship is approved, the house will be ours." Then came the rustle of an envelope and the doctor's voice. "I'll send the report tonight." Aaron stepped back, his face drained of color. Elena began to cry, her voice trembling. "No, it's not what you think. It's edited." I swear Davies closed the laptop, his expression cold. "The recording was verified directly from the original device inside this house. It's authentic. The police will be questioning Dr. Lewis this afternoon." Lucille sat still, her hand resting on her teacup, her tone calm but piercing. "My daughter-in-law once said I should be cared for somewhere safe. Perhaps now she's the one who needs that." Elena stared at her, panic flaring in her eyes. "You spied on me. You trapped me." Lucille tilted her head slightly. "No, I just decided to remember clearly after hearing you speak too much." Aaron stood between them, his voice unsteady. "Elena, is it true?" She shook her head desperately, tears streaming down her face. "I only wanted us to have a better life. I wasn't trying to hurt your mother. I thought this house could be our new beginning." Lucille looked at her son and said quietly, "You see, people can lie so softly, but the truth always weighs heavier." One of the officers stepped forward and whispered something to Davies, who nodded before speaking again. "We need Mrs. Elena to come with us for questioning and to ensure Mrs. Grant's safety." Elena stumbled back, frightened. "No, I'm not going anywhere. I didn't do anything wrong." Aaron approached her, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Elena, please cooperate. I can't help you if you keep resisting." She looked at him, realizing the trust in his eyes was gone. Lowering her head, she began to cry quietly as the officers escorted her out. When the door closed, silence filled the house. The ticking of the grandfather clock blended with the soft wind rustling the porch. Aaron stood frozen, lost, and broken. "Mother, I don't know what to say." Lucille stepped closer, resting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to say anything. Some things can only be understood through silence." He sat down, his face pale and weary. "I trusted the wrong person." "No," Lucille said softly. "You just loved in the wrong way. The greatest mistake of kind people is believing everyone has a heart like theirs." She turned toward the window, sunlight glinting on her calm face, her gray eyes deep as the lake outside. "This house has endured enough lies. From now on, it will hold only the truth." Outside, the police car drove away, its tires crunching against the gravel. Elena's white silhouette grew smaller and smaller in the midday light. Inside, the fire in the hearth burned steadily, its glow reflected in Lucille's eyes, the light of a woman who had reclaimed justice through patience and wisdom. She turned back to her son and said gently, "Now you can start over, Aaron, but this time choose what's real." He nodded, voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Mother." Lucille smiled faintly and pulled him into her arms, her warmth steady but her gaze still strong. It's all right. I'm still here, and this house is still our home. Outside, the clouds parted, and sunlight spilled across the lake, peaceful and clear, as if everything dark had finally been washed away. That afternoon, after the police car disappeared down the road, the lake house fell into a strange stillness. Aaron sat quietly in the living room, his hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the cold tile floor. He still hadn't recovered. Everything he had believed in love, marriage, family had collapsed in a single morning. Lucille stood by the window watching the fading light shimmer over the lake. Her voice was low and calm. The storm has passed, but the water is still murky. It will take time to clear again, my son. Aaron looked up, his eyes tired. I don't understand how I could have been so blind. You saw everything, yet you said nothing. Lucille nodded. Because sometimes speaking the truth too soon only makes people turn against you. I had to let her believe I was weak. Arrogance is what makes liars reveal themselves. His voice broke. You saved me and you saved this house. I owe you everything. Lucille stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. No one owes anyone. A mother's love exists to protect her child, whether he believes it or not. Outside, the wind from the lake stirred the red maple branches. In the crisp autumn air, the house seemed to breathe again after months of suffocation. The smell of new paint and Elena's perfume was fading, replaced by the familiar scent of old wood and tea. That evening, Aaron went upstairs to tidy his mother's study, the one Elena had once wanted to renovate. When he opened the cabinet, he found an old family photograph tucked between the dusty journals. Lucille, his father, and himself as a child, smiling beneath the rose trellis. He sat down and held the frame for a long time. His mother's soft footsteps sounded behind him. You found it, didn't you? Yes, he said quietly, eyes misty. I'd forgotten how happy this house used to be. Lucille touched the photo gently. Her voice was steady. Happiness never disappears, it just gets covered for a while. When you clear the dust away, it's still there. The night passed peacefully until the phone rang. Lucille answered. Mr. Davies' calm but weighty voice came through the line. Mrs. Grant, Dr. Lewis, has been questioned. He confessed that everything was done at Elena's request, and we've sent the case to court. You are officially protected, and no one is allowed to interfere with the property. Lucille exhaled softly, relief in her tone. Thank you. At last, the truth is written down. Davies added, There's more. The media might approach you. They're interested in your story. She smiled faintly. I don't need fame. I only want peace. But if my story helps others see the warning signs, I'll speak. When she hung up, Aaron looked over. What did they say? Everything is settled, Lucille replied. You can rest easy now. He nodded, though his face remained somber. What about Elena? She paused for a moment, then said quietly, If she's lucky, she'll have time in silence to think. Some people need the dark before they can see the light. Night fell and the wind calmed. Mother and son sat by the fireplace, the flames dancing across the walls. Aaron made his mother a cup of tea, the scent of licorice root spreading gently through the room. I'm sorry, Mom, he said sincerely. I wasn't brave enough to see the truth. Lucille looked at him, her eyes soft. It's all right. Everyone has loved the wrong person at least once. What matters is that you stopped before it was too late. Silence settled between them. The wood crackled and the steady ticking of the clock filled the room. Then Lucille spoke again, her voice warm yet resolute. Tomorrow we start over. We'll clean the house, remove everything she brought in. Every piece of this home should carry our breath, not her facade." Aaron smiled faintly. "Yes, I want it to feel like it used to." Later that night, before bed, Lucille stepped out onto the porch and gazed at the moonlight rippling across the lake. The water lay calm, like silk. She whispered softly, as if speaking to herself or perhaps to her late husband, "I've kept our home safe, and I've kept our son. Maybe it's time I let go of my anger." The breeze brushed through her silver hair, carrying the faint scent of salt and autumn. In the quiet darkness, Lucille closed her eyes, her heart at peace. The battle was over. What remained was not victory, but serenity, the kind she once thought she had lost forever. The next morning, the lake shimmered under clear sunlight, as if no storm had ever passed through. Lucille woke early, breathing in the scent of damp wood and fresh grass from the back garden. There were no more high heels clicking on the floor, no more secret phone calls or venomous whispers, only the sound of birds greeting the morning and the warm aroma of freshly baked bread from the oven. Aaron came downstairs. His hair tousled, his expression calmer. "It's so quiet this morning," he said, pouring himself some coffee. Lucille smiled. "Silence is the most beautiful sound once you've lived through the noise of deceit." They ate breakfast in peaceful silence. Afterward, Lucille opened the cabinet and pulled out the old embroidered curtains Elena had once called outdated. She spread them across the table. "Will you help me hang these again?" Aaron nodded. When the worn fabric was hung, sunlight streamed through the floral patterns, casting gentle golden patches across the walls. "Just like the old days," he said softly. "It's not like the old days," Lucille replied, her voice low and warm. "It's home again." By noon, Bloom stopped by, carrying a basket of apples and her familiar kind smile. "I heard everything is finally settled," she said. Lucille poured tea and gestured for her to sit. "Thanks to you, I was able to keep it all." Bloom smiled. "No, you kept it because of your own patience. I just held the lantern so you could see the path." Lucille nodded, eyes glistening with quiet gratitude. "Without your advice, I might have been pushed out of my own home by now." Bloom squeezed her hand gently. "You know, truth doesn't always win fast, but it always wins in the end." After Bloom left, Lucille went to the back garden. She began trimming the rose bushes Elena once wanted to tear out. Her hands trembled slightly but remained steady, careful as if she were tending to a part of her own soul. Nearby, Aaron was wiping down his father's old wooden chair. "I think I'll stay here with you for a while," he said softly. Lucille looked at him with a faint, bittersweet smile. "My son, I don't want you to stay out of guilt. Stay only if you truly want to." "I do," he said. "You told me once that happiness doesn't disappear, it just gets covered up. I want to brush the dust away." As the afternoon light turned golden, the house glowed with warmth. Mother and son carefully packed Elena's belongings into small boxes. There was no hatred in their movements, only quiet finality. Lucille retrieved the old picture frame and placed it back on the mantel where it belonged. Inside was the photo of her and her husband, hand in hand beneath the rose trellis of long ago. Later that evening, Aaron glanced at his phone. "The police just released the report," he said. "Dr. Lewis has been suspended and Elena. She confessed to fraud and agreed to pay restitution." Lucille set down her teacup, her eyes calm and free of anger. "Justice may arrive slowly, but when it does, all we can do is receive it in silence." Aaron looked at her, moved. "You're stronger than I ever imagined, Mother. I don't know if I could have done what you did." She smiled gently. "Strength doesn't come from youth, my dear. It comes from losing enough to finally know what's worth keeping." After dinner, they sat together on the porch, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. The sky was clear, the sunset casting soft orange light over the lake. Mother Erin said quietly, "I met with the lawyer. I want to add your name as co-owner. This house is yours, but I want to help protect it." Lucille looked at him, her gaze tender. "That's not necessary, son. Paperwork can't protect a home. Only love can." Aaron smiled faintly, his voice thick with emotion. "Then I just want you to know that this time I won't let anyone touch what's sacred again." That night, Lucille sat alone by the fireplace. The flames flickered, painting shifting patterns of light and shadow across her face. Inside her heart, there was no anger left, only a quiet peace. She opened her old notebook and wrote a new line beneath the last entry, Day 13. "The house has found its true breath again." People can steal possessions, but they can never take away the dignity of those who know how to wait. She put the pen down, listening to the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the stillness of the night. Outside, the lake glowed under the moonlight, reflecting the silhouette of a woman who had weathered every storm and remained standing, not through power or vengeance, but through the steadfast strength of her heart. The next morning, the lake was still as glass, reflecting the trees along its edge that were slowly turning golden with late autumn. Lucille awoke as the first rays of sunlight slipped through the window and touched the old embroidered blanket. The smell of coffee mingled with pine wood, and the house seemed to whisper a gentle greeting to the new day. She sat up, wrapped a woolen shawl around her shoulders, and felt a strange warmth, a peace she had once believed was lost forever. Downstairs, Aaron was making breakfast. Wearing an apron, he whisked eggs, clumsily smiling to himself. "Dad would probably laugh if he saw me like this," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. Lucille looked at her son, her eyes filled with pride. "Your father wouldn't laugh. He'd say his son finally learned how to take care of someone." They both laughed, the sound soft and warm in the quiet kitchen. After breakfast, Aaron suggested cleaning out the attic, the place where Elena used to store her cold, elegant possessions. They opened the window, wide sunlight catching the drifting dust. Inside were a few remaining boxes, empty perfume bottles, expensive dresses, and a framed photo of Elena smiling proudly in the living room, her eyes sharp and distant. Lucille stared at it for a long moment before saying softly, "Sometimes people try so hard to shine on the outside just to hide how empty they are inside." She removed the photo from its frame, rolled it up, and set it aside. In the corner of the attic, Lucille found her old recorder, the tool that had once saved her. She brushed the dust off and placed it on the table. Aaron picked it up, his voice low. "This thing saved us." Lucille nodded. "And it reminds us that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the only way to truly hear." Around noon, Bloom arrived carrying a basket of apple pastries and an envelope from the local television station. "They want to interview you," she said. "You don't have to accept, but I think you should." Lucille smiled gently and shook her head. "I never liked cameras, but if my story can wake someone up, I'll tell it. Not to expose anyone, but to show the power of truth." The next day, the television crew came. They set up their cameras on the porch, where sunlight filtered through the red maple branches. The reporter asked Mrs. Grant what gave you the patience to wait for justice instead of fighting back immediately. Lucille looked out at the lake, her voice steady. "Because I know liars are always afraid of silence. I didn't need to shout to prove I was right. I just needed to give them time to reveal their own guilt." The reporter lowered her head respectfully. "Do you have any regrets?" "No," Lucille replied softly. "Only sadness that some young people believe trust is something that can be bought." The interview was brief, but after it aired, many people from the town came to visit her, bringing flowers and words of gratitude. Some said their mothers had been taken advantage of by their children. Others whispered that Lucille's story gave them courage to stand up for themselves. Lucille didn't say much, only smiled kindly. In her eyes was something both light and deep, the look of someone who had seen the edge of pain and learned how to let go. Later that afternoon, Aaron drove her to the hillside where his father was buried. The air was still the grass, swaying gently, and the faint scent of salt drifted from the lake. Lucille placed a bouquet of white roses on the grave and whispered, "I kept our home safe, and I kept our son. Do you hear me?" Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder. "He would be proud of you." She nodded, tears glimmering but refusing to fall. "Your father once told me the greatest wealth in life isn't money, but the peace that comes from knowing you owe nothing to anyone. Now I understand." When they returned home, the sunset painted the lake red and gold. The light reflected off the windows, filling the house with warmth. Together, Lucille and Aaron hung the old wooden sign back on the gate, Grant Lake House, home of heart and memory. The breeze passed through, making the sign sway gently, its soft creak sounding like the house itself had found its voice again. That evening, mother and son sat by the fireplace. Aaron opened his laptop to show her hundreds of comments from strangers. "Your story made me believe in justice. Thank you for your courage. You remind me of my own mother." Lucille read each line slowly, her heart trembling. If these words help even one person stop being afraid, she said softly, then it's enough. As night fell, the house glowed with golden light from the fire. Lucille opened her old notebook and added one final entry, Day 14. After the storm, people think peace is a reward, but in truth, peace is a choice. I chose forgiveness not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. She closed the notebook and placed it on the table, gazing out the window where the moon floated behind drifting clouds. In the gentle light, her reflection stared back, no longer the frightened mother once pushed aside, but a woman who had reclaimed her dignity, quietly and proudly. A soft wind swept through the house, carrying the scent of roses from the garden. And in that moment, Lucille knew the home had come back to life, and so had her heart. That morning, Grant Lake House was bathed in the soft golden light of winter. The lake outside shimmered, rippling gently as the wind carried the scent of dry leaves and warm pine wood through the air. Lucille awoke as sunlight streamed through the embroidered curtains, painting a silken glow on the wall. She sat up slowly, a feeling of lightness spreading through her chest. Today there were no sharp echoes of Elena's laughter, no whispers hiding behind the walls, only quiet simplicity and truth. Downstairs, Aaron was making coffee. He was no longer the hesitant man he had been months ago. His face was calmer, his eyes clearer. When he saw his mother descending the stairs, he smiled gentle and serene. "I made your favorite," he said. "Jasmine blend with a hint of cinnamon." Lucille sat at the table, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Thank you, Aaron. I've waited a long time for a morning this peaceful." Breakfast was simple toast apple jam and the aroma of coffee filling the air. As sunlight streamed through the window and fell upon the lace tablecloth, Lucille felt time itself pause. She looked at her son and said softly, "Do you see it, Aaron? Silence isn't empty. It's the most precious gift after you've heard enough lies." Aaron smiled and nodded. "You taught me that. Now I finally understand." They spent the morning tidying up the house together. Lucille took out the old family photograph that Elena had once tossed into a drawer, brushed off the dust, and placed it back on the mantel. It was taken on Aaron's 10th birthday, his father holding him proudly, while Lucille stood beneath the rose trellis, all three smiling brightly. "Your father took this with his old film camera." Lucille set her gaze distant. "He used to say that photographs can't keep people, but they can keep memories." I think he was right. Outside, Aaron painted the white fence. The wind from the lake brushed his face, drying the paint on his hands quickly. Lucille watched him with a quiet smile. Every stroke of his brush seemed to erase the stains of the past, restoring the house to its true form. Around noon, Bloom arrived carrying a basket of warm apple pastries and an envelope. From the court, she said, placing it on the table. Lucille opened it carefully, reading each line. It was the final confirmation the case was officially closed. Elena was sentenced to 3 years of probation. Dr. Lewis's medical license was revoked, and the house was legally confirmed as Lucille's permanent property. She nodded slowly, then smiled the smile of someone who had reached the end of a long journey. "It's done," she said. "I've lost nothing, and more importantly, I haven't lost myself." Bloom squeezed her hand warmly. "You've won, Lucille." "No," Lucille replied softly. "I've simply survived, and sometimes survival is victory enough." That afternoon, Lucille and Aaron went to the village market. Neighbors who had once gossiped and doubted her now came forward to shake her hand. "Mrs. Grant, we read about you in the paper." "You're so brave," one woman said. Lucille smiled kindly. "I'm not braver than anyone else. I just refuse to let someone else write the ending of my story." When they returned home, they found an envelope on the porch. Inside was a letter from Elena, written in shaky handwriting. "I've paid the price, Mrs. Grant. You may never forgive me, but I will never forget the look in your eyes that day. It made me see how small I'd become. I hope you and Aaron find peace." Lucille read the letter, folded it carefully, and said nothing. She only sighed, her eyes distant. Aaron asked quietly, "What will you do with it?" "Keep it," she replied. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's how we put down the weight that others placed on our shoulders." As evening approached, they hung the old wooden sign back over the gate, "Grant Lake House, home of heart and memory." The wind stirred, making the sign sway gently and creak softly like a whispered greeting. Lucille looked at the inscription, her eyes glistening. "Your father carved these words by hand," she said. "He told me once if I ever felt lost, I should look back here and remember, home is where we belong, not where we're trapped." As the sun set, golden light spread across the lake. Mother and son sat together on the porch, watching the reflection shimmer on the water. "You know," Lucille said quietly, "I once thought revenge would bring peace. But now I understand justice isn't about striking back. It's about allowing truth to stand tall without shouting." Aaron gazed at her, his voice soft. "You didn't just save the house, Mother. You saved its soul." Lucille smiled, gentle yet firm. A house only has a soul when it's built on love and truth. Later that night, after Bloom had gone home, Lucille sat in the living room. The fireplace glowed warmly, casting soft golden light across her face. She opened her old notebook, the one filled with trembling words written during the darkest days, and began to write new ones with steady hands. Day 15. Every storm passes, leaving behind water that reflects the truth. The house is free of deceit, and in its silence I can finally hear myself. I didn't just reclaim my home, I reclaimed my faith. She closed the notebook, placed it on the table, and stepped outside. The full moon shimmered on the lake, and a gentle breeze rustled through the maples, carrying the soft whisper of falling leaves. Lucille closed her eyes and smiled. Her voice echoed in her mind, a message to anyone listening to her story. Sometimes strength isn't in what we say, but in how we stand when everything tries to break us. If you're in the dark, be patient. The light never disappears. It only waits for you to be still enough to see it. She went back inside, turned off the lights, and left the fireplace burning low. The warm glow flickered across the wall, illuminating the family photograph, still hanging proudly. In its golden light, her late husband's face seemed to smile back at her. Lucille whispered softly, her voice as light as breath. "I've kept the most precious thing of all kindness." Outside, night fell over the lake, but within that house there was a light that would never fade, the light of a woman once thought weak who proved that faith and wisdom could outlast every lie. And for those still listening, her final words lingered. Share this story if you still believe in justice. Let those who have been hurt know they're not alone, because sometimes one quiet voice that dares to speak can change the world. Lucille closed her eyes, hearing the wind from the lake mingle with the steady ticking of the old clock. The house rested in peace, and in that silence one truth was clear. Grant Lake House belonged to the light again, and the woman who called it home had finally found herself once more.